Hello, this is Bonnie Sigmund from the Laurel County Extension Office, and this is our second little series on vegetable gardening. If you're just joining us, you can get on our Facebook page, Laurel County Agriculture and Horticulture page, and watch Series 1. And if you have any questions, you can call our office, 606-864-4167. Last time we talked about where to put your garden, so this time we're going to talk a little bit more about the soil and planting your garden. Soil testing is one of the things that our office does provide. We are still open to doing soil tests. They're $10, which basically covers the cost of sending them to Lexington. We will get the results back. I will look at them and write on them what exactly you need to put per 1,000 square feet or per acre. You don't have to worry about trying to decipher or read, all those numbers and what they mean. I'll just write out there, here's an example, apply 10 pound of 10, 10, 10 per 1,000 square feet. Why do a soil test? A soil test is basically the only way of knowing exactly how much lime or fertilizer to apply to produce a crop or a vegetable garden or lawn. If we add too much fertilizer, of course, it wastes money. Not good for the environment. It can also injure and kill your plants. If you've ever put ammonium nitrate on a plant or burned one up with fertilizer, you know that's a very big possibility. So we don't want to add too much. Fertilizer prices have doubled and tripled in the last 10 years, so it's definitely an investment that you may not need to put into your garden. Low pH and poor fertility reduces your yield and your quality, and we'll talk about pH here in the next slide. pH is basically a range of how acid or alkaline your soil is. For most vegetable gardens, 6.0 to 6.2 is the optimum place so the plants can get everything they need to grow. You want to take a soil sample in the fall, and we'll talk about how to actually take one in just a moment. And you want to apply the lime in the fall, or the sulfur if you've got blueberries that you're going to have to lower the pH for. Generally, it takes about 6 months for lime or sulfur to change your pH. So that's the reason we ask that you do it in the fall. This is a picture of a pH graph. Basically, the pH numbers are along the bottom. And I always show this to people because it took me a while to figure out why pH made such a difference in the plants you're growing. So I try to use, say, blueberries, for example. Blueberries like a 4.5 to a 5.0. And if you'll look between the 4.5 and 5.0 on the bottom, and then you go up, you notice the amount of iron there's a lot of iron available at that pH range, a lot of boron, and quite a bit of copper. Those are the 3 to 4 major nutrients that blueberries have to survive. If you go on over to 6.2 to 6.5, which is what most vegetables like to grow in, you notice that the molybdenum increases, the iron starts to decrease, you have a lot of sulfur, you have a lot of potassium. Those are all things that a blueberry doesn't like, and that will kill one. That's the reason you want to have your pH exactly right, because whatever point on that scale is exactly the right amount of nutrients available to that plant so that it's happy and will produce. How to take a soil sample. Basically, you're going to use a small trowel or spade, or if you're going to be doing several, you can come by our extension office and borrow our soil probe, which is what this gentleman is using. You want to take at least 4 inches deep and no more than 6 inches deep, and you need to bring us a slice of the soil. Okay. Collect 8 to 10 places in your garden. Avoid any irregular or real wet areas. What I mean by irregular is next to a gravel road. Try not to get too close to it, because if you think about it, the lime that washes off of that gravel is going to change that soil some compared to the rest of your garden. So try to stay away from those irregular type places. You're going to combine the samples in a clean plastic bucket. We say plastic container because a metal container can sometimes change your soil samples. So mix it all together. You'll bring about a pint up to our extension office. We have bags sitting out in the foyer right now, along with the forms to fill out. You fill the bag with your soil, fill out the form, especially put your name, your address, and your phone number on there. And if there's something that you are not sure about, leave it blank. We will call you and get more information before we send it. Planting a garden. You want to have a plan before you start. You want to, of course, like I talked earlier, figure out where you want it and what size you want. Then you're going to go out and you're going to actually measure out your garden and I say string it up or put corner posts in so that you have an idea of exactly the size of garden you're going to grow. Okay, then we're going to plan it out on paper. And this is all the things we're going to talk about when it comes to putting your garden plan together. Okay, why do we plan it on paper? A good garden plan, of course, saves time, space, work, and money. And how does it do that? Because you know exactly what size garden you want. You know how far apart you're going to put your tomato plants, for example. So you can do the math and work out exactly how many tomato plants you're going to need. That way you're not buying too many, or you're not having to make a second trip to the store or to the greenhouse to buy more. So a garden plan saves us time, space, work, and money. It also can increase your yields and the length of harvest. The reason why we say length of harvest is because if you watch where you put your early spring vegetables, you can often come right in behind and plant something for later on in the season, so that you're actually getting 2 harvests off the same plot of little land. And of course, we need to learn from our past. I am a person who has a very short memory. I can't remember what variety I put where from last spring to when I'm harvesting. So you need to have it wrote down. And don't do like I do and lay it down somewhere so that it's lost. Keep all this in a place that you can find it and safe. That way you know from year to year what crops you grew, what did well, what didn't. Sometimes what didn't is just as important. What you did that made a difference this year compared to the last. Have you tried something new? Say placing plants closer together. Did it work for you well? Did it not? That way you've got a written down record of everything that you've done. Vegetable selections. Of course, grow what your family likes, and realize that different plants have different space requirements in your garden. I know a lot of people who have had their pumpkins sitting out on their porch or out in their landscaping and have let them rot, and then next thing they know they have a pumpkin vine growing in their yard. So they let it grow, but they don't realize quite that it's going to take up 25 to 30 square feet of their lawn. So different things have different amount of space requirements. Your squashes, pumpkins, watermelons, cantaloupe, those all require a large amount of space. Some of them, especially those larger giant pumpkins, I have seen take as much as 50, 60 square feet of space. Think about the things that can only be harvested one time. Sweet corn is the biggest thing that can only be harvested once, and it does require a lot of space. Crops that require less and have multiple harvests, of course, are your peppers, tomatoes, cucumbers, summer squashes, and zucchinis. Vegetable selections. There's crops that are susceptible to insects and diseases, and then there are crops that are more pest resistant and perhaps easier to grow for a beginner. Crops that are really susceptible to insects during the spring are your broccoli, your cabbages, and cauliflowers. Those are really susceptible to caterpillars. If you see those pretty little white butterflies flying around your cabbage and your broccoli every spring, they're fun to watch, but they're also a big flag that tells you that you're going to start having some caterpillar problems. Those little white butterflies are busy going around visiting your cabbage plants and laying eggs. Those eggs will soon hatch out to be those little green caterpillars that like to put holes in your broccoli and cabbage. So that's where you need to be paying attention and doing a lot of insect management, and we'll talk about that in some of the later series. Crops that are pest resistant are the ones that insects don't bother, most diseases don't bother. Of course, okra, onions, garlic, sweet potatoes, beets, and carrots are all those pest resistant varieties. Variety selections, there are also thousands of varieties of cabbage. There are thousands of varieties of tomatoes. Okay, so which ones do you choose? That's really a personal preference, unless you're growing commercial. Of course, if you're growing a commercial garden, then you're in the business of selling. So you want something that's going to taste fairly well. You're going to want something that is pest resistant. You're going to want something that can handle being shipped and moved around several times without being damaged. For a homeowner, I usually suggest the All-American selections if you can find some of those varieties. They are in your seed books. Those varieties are the ones that have been tested by homeowners and that seem to be a well-rounded vegetable, meaning that the taste is good, they don't have as many problems as far as diseases or pests go, and they perform really well in a homeowner situation. Okay? This is something I always like to show people. This is what varieties can do for you. These are the exact same plants. This one I do believe is pumpkins, and then the other is peppers. These plants are treated exactly the same. This is a research trial. They are sprayed the same and they are watered exactly the same, fertilized the same. The only difference is the actual variety. The varieties that are doing well are the virus-resistant varieties or the disease-resistant varieties. These are the ones that are bred to not have as much damage when those diseases become prevalent. The ones that you see in front that are collapsed or dying are the ones that are susceptible. So resistant varieties are always a good investment. Their seed is usually a little more expensive, but you're going to be more likely to have a actual crop to harvest, and you're going to have less inputs as far as spraying and insect and disease management. This is another example of that. This is pumpkins. Of course, the Gladiator being the more expensive disease resistance variety, and the ACX 6501s down in the lower corner being the susceptible variety. Rotation. If you have a small garden, you need to learn to rotate your plants around so that every year you don't plant a crop that is related in the same family in the same spot every year. I have seen commercial growers who, especially one was a pumpkin grower who grew pumpkins in the same field every year, and of course he done fine year 1, year 2. Year 3, he done just fine. He had done decided that he didn't need to rotate anymore. Year 4, he had a crop failure simply because the disease and insect pressures had built up in that spot of land. So year 4, he had a complete crop failure. So we need to learn to rotate our garden around so that we don't put plants that are closely related, meaning that the same diseases that affect one or the same insect that affects one will affect the other the same way. We need to move them around so that they're put in a different spot every year. But what plants are family or related to each other? This is a list of the crop group and then the actual crops, vegetable crop that is in that group. Cucurbits, of course, are cucumbers, muskmelon, pumpkin, squash, and watermelon. They are related, meaning that the insects that will eat on a cucumber also eat on a watermelon. The diseases also do the same way. A disease for a cucumber is the same disease on the watermelon. So we don't want to plant those in the same spot for up to 3 years if there's any way we can possibly help it. We want to put it in the right corner, right upper corner 1 year, next year put it to the left lower corner. Switch things around every year as much as you possibly can. This is a simple crop rotation plan. Cool season crops, basically they took the garden and divided it into 4 corners, and each year they rotate these around so that we don't have the same crop in the same spot every year. It takes 3 years to get them back to the same spot. In our rotation, we seen they were talking about cold hardy and then moderately cold hardy, and then we have ones that are warm weather plants. Very cold hardy are the things that you can plant, say the 1st of March or mid-March. These are the plants that survive frosts, and some colder temperatures below a freeze, but not a real hard freeze. These are snap peas, cabbages, onions, radishes, lettuces. All of these can handle temperatures, say 25 and above. Moderately cold hardy plants, these are broccoli, cauliflower, Irish potatoes, turnips. These are plants that can handle frosts, but not a hard freeze below 25 degrees. Then we have our warm season crops. These are the crops that we plant that cannot handle frost. A frost will kill them or damage them severely. Okay, our beans, our cucumbers, our tomatoes, our sweet corn, our pumpkins and squash, these are all the plants that we plant after our last threat of frost, which for the most part of Kentucky is around Mother's Day. Is a fairly safe time to plant is after Mother's Day, unless you're willing to provide these plants with some extra protection, covering them up in some type of, I've even seen people take and put buckets over top of plants to protect them. Just be sure to know if you plant these plants before the end of frost, you're going to either lose them or you're going to have to protect them.